Did you know that before we had pharmacies on every corner, the pharmacy was the forest, the field, and the garden? People in the Middle Ages didn't have microscopes. They couldn't see viruses or bacteria, but they could see infection, they could feel fever, and they knew pain. They lived in a world where a small cut could kill you. Survival wasn't an abstract idea, it was a daily practical task. So, what did they do? They watched, they experimented, they passed knowledge down through generations. Much of it was superstition, dangerous, and wrong. But what if some of it wasn't? What if, buried beneath the folklore and the fear, there were remedies that actually worked? Remedies based on centuries of human trial and error. We have sterilized our world and our medicine, packaging single molecules in plastic bottles. But have we lost something in the process? Have we forgotten the raw, complex power of the things that grow right outside our doors? Let's look back. Not with romanticism, but with curiosity. Let's see what they knew. Number 19. Could a tree branch really cure a fever? Imagine you lived in the year 1200. Your child has a fever. Their head is hot. They are crying from aches that rack their small body. There is no doctor to call. There is no children's ibuprofen. You are terrified. This is a moment that could lead to death. What do? You might go to the riverbank, to the place where the willow trees grow. Their branches are flexible, they bend but don't break. You would peel back some of the bark. You would either give it to your child to chew, or you would brew it into a brutally bitter tea. You would make them drink it, hoping, praying that the fever would break. This wasn't a rare or magical cure. It was common knowledge. People had been doing this for a very, very long time. The ancient Egyptians used it. The Greek physician Hippocrates, around 400 BC, wrote about using willow bark to reduce fever and inflammation. This knowledge survived the fall of Rome and persisted throughout the medieval period as a staple of folk medicine. It was the go-to remedy for pain and fever. Of course, they had no idea why it worked. They didn't know about chemical compounds or biological pathways. They just knew that if you used this specific bark, the pain often lessened and the fever sometimes broke. It was a result they could see and feel. For centuries, that was enough. The science came much, much later. In 1828, a German pharmacologist named Johann Buchner managed to isolate the active ingredient from willow bark. He created bitter, yellow, needle-like crystals and named them salicin, after the Latin name for the willow tree, salix. Later, chemists figured out how to convert salicin into salicylic acid. This was a powerful anti-inflammatory, but it was incredibly harsh on the stomach. The final step came in 1897. A chemist named Felix Hoffmann, working for the German company Bayer, found a way to modify salicylic acid to make it gentler. He created acetylsalicylic acid. We know it today as aspirin. It became one of the most widely used drugs in the world, a multi-billion-dollar industry. And it all started with a person in desperate need chewing on a piece of tree bark. Modern medicine has validated this ancient practice completely. We now know that salicin works by inhibiting enzymes called COX-1 and COX-2, which are involved in the body's inflammation and pain signaling processes. It's a direct, measurable pharmacological effect. Studies, like one published in the journal Phytotherapy Research in 2015, have reviewed the clinical evidence for willow bark extract, finding it effective for lower back pain and osteoarthritis, albeit slower to act than its synthetic offspring, aspirin. The medieval person with a fever wasn't just performing a ritual, they were taking a legitimate pain reliever and anti-inflammatory. They were practicing a raw form of pharmacology. The tree was the pill. We took the willow bark, found the one active ingredient, salicin, and turned it into a pill, aspirin. We celebrated this as a triumph of modern science, and in many ways it was. But the original bark contains more than just salicin. It has a whole suite of other compounds like polyphenols and flavonoids, which have their own anti-inflammatory and antioxidant effects. The whole is different from the part. Did we lose something in the purification process? Could those other compounds in the bark have helped buffer the stomach irritating effects of the main ingredient? By focusing on a single molecule, are we ignoring the complex, synergistic pharmacy that exists within a single plant? What else is in that bark that, we never bothered to look for? Number 18. Can a common weed heal your skin? Picture a medieval village. The paths are not paved, they are dirt, mud, and stone. Children run barefoot. Farmers work the fields with their hands. Cuts, scrapes, and insect bites are not an occasional nuisance, they are a constant reality. And in a world without antiseptic wipes or antibiotic creams, any break in the skin is an open door for infection. A simple blister from a new shoe could become a festering wound. So, what did they have? They had the weeds that grew right there in the trampled dirt paths. One of the most common was a low-growing plant with broad-ribbed leaves. We call it plantain, not the banana-like fruit, but plantago major. It's so common we see it every day in lawns and sidewalk cracks and, think nothing of it. To a medieval person, it was a medicine chest underfoot. The use was simple and immediate. If a child fell and scraped their knee, their mother might grab a few plantain leaves, chew them up into a rough mash, and apply the poultice directly to the wound. It was called a field dressing. The act of chewing released the juices from the leaves, and her saliva might have had some minor antibacterial properties of its own. This green paste was thought to soothe the pain, reduce the swelling, and, most importantly, draw out dirt and prevent the wound from festering. It was used for cuts, bee stings, burns, and rashes. Hildegard of Bingen, the famous 12th century German abbess and polymath, wrote extensively about the healing properties of plants. She recommended plantain for everything from broken bones to gout to insect bites, believing in its powerful cooling and drawing properties. This wasn't some obscure remedy, it was as common as reaching for a bandage today. So, was it just a placebo, a comforting green smudge on a child's knee? The science says no. Plantain leaves are full of active compounds. One of the most significant is allantoin, a substance that promotes the growth of new skin cells and soothes irritation. If you look at the ingredients list on modern skin creams, especially those for scars, rashes, or acne, you will often find allantoin listed. It's a scientifically recognized skin healer. The leaves also contain aucubin, a powerful antimicrobial agent that can help fight off bacteria, and a host of tannins, which act as astringents to tighten tissues and help stop minor bleeding. A 2017 study in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology investigated the wound healing potential of plantago major. The researchers found that extracts from the plant significantly accelerated wound closure in animal models, supporting its traditional use. The medieval mother chewing up those leaves was essentially creating a fresh, crude, but effective skin healing and antiseptic ointment on the spot. We spend billions of dollars on complex skincare products manufactured in sterile labs. Many of them work by using isolated synthetic versions of compounds like allantoin. We get it from a chemical factory, the medieval peasant got it from a weed growing in the dirt path. It makes you wonder. The plantain leaf offers a complex blend of these healing compounds, not just one. Does the synergy between the allantoin, the aucubin, and the tannins provide a benefit that a single ingredient cream can't? How many other weeds that we poison and pull from our perfect lawns are actually packed with compounds that could solve our everyday ailments? Have we become so disconnected from our environment that we are literally throwing away our medicine? Number 17, could a stinking clove keep you from getting sick? In the Middle Ages, fear had a smell. It smelled like sickness, decay, and death. With plagues like the Black Death sweeping through Europe and wiping out up to half the population, staying healthy was a matter of intense daily concern. They didn't understand germ theory. They believed sickness was caused by bad air, or miasma, or an imbalance of the four humors in the body. But, despite their flawed theories, some of their preventative measures had a core of practical wisdom. One of the most potent and pungent of these was garlic. Allium sativum. It was more than just a seasoning for food. It was considered a powerful medicine, a ward against disease. Monks in monasteries, who were often the keepers of medical knowledge, grew it in their physic gardens. People would eat it raw, hang braids of it in their homes, and even wear it around their necks, hoping its powerful odor would drive away the evil spirits or bad air that brought sickness. This wasn't just a European superstition. Garlic's medicinal use is ancient and global. It was found in the tomb of the Egyptian pharaoh Tutankhamun, dating back to around 1350 BC. It was prescribed by Hippocrates in ancient Greece for respiratory problems and parasites. The Romans fed it to their soldiers to give them strength and courage. During the Middle Ages, its reputation as a preventative medicine only grew. When the plague hit, plague doctors would sometimes stuff their beaked masks with garlic and other aromatic herbs, believing it would purify the air they breathed. While the mask itself offered some minor physical barrier, the belief was in the power of the aroma. People ate garlic in massive quantities during outbreaks, hoping to make their bodies inhospitable to the disease. The 12th century Regimen Sanitatis Salernitanum, a famous medieval medical text, advises garlic to counteract poison and infection. They believed its heat and pungency could restore balance to the body's humors and fight off illness from within. Modern science has peeled back the layers of the garlic bulb and found a treasure trove of potent chemical compounds. The key player is a sulfur compound called alliin. When a garlic clove is crushed or chewed, an enzyme called alliinase is released. This enzyme converts the alliin into a new powerful compound, allicin. This is what gives garlic its characteristic pungent smell. It's also what gives it its incredible antimicrobial power. Allicin is a potent antibacterial, antiviral, and antifungal agent. Countless studies have demonstrated this. A review published in the Avicenna Journal of Phytomedicine in 2014 summarized the extensive research on garlic's therapeutic effects, highlighting its proven ability to combat a wide range of bacteria, including Salmonella and E. coli. A 2012 study even found that a compound derived from garlic was 100 times more effective than two popular antibiotics at fighting the Campylobacter bacterium, a common cause of food poisoning. So, when a medieval person ate a raw clove of garlic, they were essentially ingesting a broad-spectrum natural antibiotic. They were right. The stinking clove really could help keep you from getting sick. Our modern approach to infection is the antibiotic, a silver bullet that targets and kills specific bacteria. But this has led to the terrifying rise of antibiotic-resistant superbugs. Garlic's power, however, comes from a complex cocktail of sulfur compounds, not just one. This complexity makes it much harder for bacteria to develop resistance. Are we too focused on finding single, patentable molecules? Does the messy and complex nature of a plant like garlic hold the key to overcoming microbial resistance? What if the future of fighting infection isn't a new, stronger antibiotic, but a return to using these complex, naturally derived compounds that bacteria have never been able to outsmart? Number 16 was drinking vinegar, really a health tonic. Vinegar. Today, we think of it as something to put on salad or use for cleaning. It's sharp, acidic, and not something most people would choose to drink straight. But in the Middle Ages, and for centuries before, vinegar was a staple of the medicine cabinet. It was a drink, a preservative, a disinfectant, and a cure-all. Roman soldiers drank a diluted vinegar beverage called posca to stay hydrated and prevent sickness. In the medieval period, vinegar was a cornerstone of public health, such as it was. During plague outbreaks, it was used to wash hands, money, and letters in the belief that it would cut through the miasma of the disease. A famous concoction from the period is for thieves' vinegar. The legend says that a group of thieves, during a plague outbreak in Marseille, France, were able to rob the dead and dying without getting sick themselves. When they were finally caught, they traded the recipe for their secret protective tonic for their freedom. The recipe, which varied, was a blend of vinegar infused with herbs like garlic, rosemary, and sage. The medical uses were extensive. Hildegard of Bingen suggested vinegar for scrofula, a type of tuberculous infection. It was mixed with honey to create a syrup called an oxymel, which was used to treat coughs and respiratory ailments. It was applied to wounds as a cleaning agent. People would drink it diluted with water as a general health tonic, believing it could balance the body's humors, aid digestion, and purify the blood. In a world where water was often contaminated and unsafe to drink, the antimicrobial properties of vinegar and wine and beer made them safer options. Adding a splash of vinegar to questionable water could literally save your life by killing off some of the harmful pathogens. It was an everyday tool for survival, a cheap and accessible form of preventative medicine. The core of vinegar's power lies in its main component, acetic acid. Acetic acid is a potent antimicrobial agent. It can kill a wide range of bacteria and other pathogens by disrupting their cell membranes. This is why we still use it as a disinfectant and a food preservative today. The medieval practice of washing things in vinegar during a plague was not just superstition, it was a scientifically sound, if rudimentary, form of disinfection. A 2018 study published in the journal Scientific Reports showed that acetic acid could effectively kill mycobacteria, including the highly drug-resistant Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Other studies have shown its effectiveness against E. coli and Staphylococcus aureus. The practice of drinking diluted vinegar also has some modern backing. Research, such as a 2015 review in the Journal of Food Science, suggests that vinegar can help regulate blood sugar levels, which may have contributed to its reputation as a health tonic. The Four Thieves vinegar was essentially a powerful antimicrobial infusion. The vinegar itself killed pathogens on contact, and the herbs steeped in it, like garlic and rosemary, released their own antibacterial and antiviral compounds. It was a multi-pronged attack on germs they couldn't even see. Separated vinegar's uses, it's either for food or for cleaning. We rarely think of it as a health product anymore unless it's a trendy, expensive bottle of apple cider vinegar. But the medieval people used it for everything. They understood its fundamental property. It was a powerful agent of purification. Is our modern obsession with specialized, single-use products blinding us to the power of simple, multi-purpose substances like vinegar? If a cheap bottle of vinegar can kill drug-resistant tuberculosis bacteria in a lab, what other simple, traditional substances have we overlooked in our search for complex, expensive solutions? Are there health benefits to ingesting small, regular amounts of acetic acid that our modern diets are completely missing? Is number 15, could a bloody worm actually save your life? This one is difficult. It's the remedy that makes most modern people cringe. The leeches. The very idea of intentionally placing a blood-sucking worm on your skin is unsettling. But for thousands of years, from ancient Egypt through the Middle Ages and up until the 19th century, leeching was not a fringe therapy. It was a mainstream medical procedure, as common as taking an aspirin is today. The medieval theory of medicine was based on the four humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Sickness was believed to be caused by an imbalance of these humors. A fever, for instance, might be seen as an excess of blood. The logical treatment, therefore, was to remove some of that excess blood. This was called bloodletting, and leeches were one of the primary tools for the job. Barber surgeons, the jacks of all trades of medieval medicine, would keep jars of live leeches, Hirudo medicinalis, in their shops. A patient with a headache, a fever, or an inflamed joint would be prescribed a course of leeching. The leeches would be applied to the skin, where they would attach and begin to feed. They would draw out the bad blood, supposedly restoring balance to the humors and curing the disease. The process was detailed in medical texts of the time, such as the works of Avicenna, a Persian physician whose writings were highly influential in medieval Europe. Leeching was used for an astonishing range of ailments, from pneumonia and insanity to gout and ear infections. While the underlying theory of the four humors was completely wrong, the practice persisted for centuries. They must have been observing some kind of positive effect, even if they attributed it to the wrong cause. Then, for about a century, leeches were dismissed as a barbaric relic of a pre-scientific age. But in a strange twist, modern medicine has brought them back. Starting in the 1980s, plastic and reconstructive surgeons began to reconsider the leech. When a surgeon reattaches a severed finger or a piece of skin for a skin graft, one of the biggest challenges is restoring blood flow. The arteries which pump blood into the area are relatively easy to reconnect, but the tiny, fragile veins that drain the blood away are much more difficult. When they don't work properly, blood pools in the reattached part. This is called venous congestion. The tissue becomes swollen, starved of oxygen, and will eventually die. Right? This is where the leech comes in. A leech applied to the congested area does two things. First, it drains the pooled, stagnant blood, immediately relieving the pressure. Second, and more importantly, its saliva is a complex chemical cocktail. It contains a powerful anticoagulant called hirudin, which prevents blood from clotting. It also contains a vasodilator, which makes blood vessels widen, and a local anesthetic so the bite doesn't hurt. The leech's saliva keeps the wound bleeding for hours after the leech has dropped off, allowing a continuous, gentle drainage that gives the body time to regrow its own tiny veins. The FDA approved leeches as a medical device in 2004. This is not alternative medicine. It is used in state-of-the-art hospitals for post-surgical care. The medieval doctors were using the right tool for the wrong reason. They thought they were draining bad humors to cure a fever. What they might have been accidentally doing was reducing the swelling and pressure of a localized infection, which could have provided some temporary relief. Today, we use the same organism with precise scientific understanding. It raises a fascinating question. How many other barbaric, ancient remedies were dismissed entirely because the theory behind them was wrong, even if the practical application had a real but misunderstood effect? Is it possible that in our rush to discard ancient theories, we also discarded tools and techniques that have a valid modern application we haven't discovered yet? What other creatures in nature produce complex biochemicals that could solve modern medical problems? Number 14, why did they put boiled grains on infected wounds? Imagine a deep splinter in your hand or a wound that is red, swollen, and hot to the touch. In the Middle Ages, this was a terrifying sign. It meant the wound was festering. It could lead to a raging infection, a lost limb or death. With no antibiotics, they had to rely on methods to draw out the poison or the pus. One of the most common and ancient of these methods was the poultice. A poultice is a soft, moist mass of material, often heated, that is applied to the body to relieve soreness and inflammation. It was the medieval equivalent of a hot compress and a drawing salve all in one. The ingredients could vary widely depending on what was available. Common bases included bread, oatmeal, or mashed grains, which were mixed with hot water or milk to form a paste. To this base, they would add medicinal herbs. For a wound that needed cleaning, they might add crushed plantain leaves. For an infection, they might add garlic or onions. For a painful joint, they might add mustard seed to increase blood flow. The process was simple. The mixture was heated, spread on a piece of cloth, and applied directly to the affected area. It was then bandaged in place and left for several hours or overnight. The goals were threefold. First, the warmth of the poultice was soothing and helped to relieve pain. Second, the moist heat was believed to soften the skin and draw the infection, splinter, or other foreign object to the surface, encouraging a boil or abscess to come to a head and drain. Third, the active ingredients from the herbs would be delivered directly to the site of the problem. This was a hands-on, practical form of medicine described in countless medieval herbals and medical texts. For example, the famous 10th century Anglo-Saxon manuscript, the Leech Book of Bald, contains numerous recipes for poultices, or salves, for treating a wide variety of wounds and ailments. It was a fundamental skill of any healer or household matriarch. Does this ancient practice hold up to scientific scrutiny? Absolutely. The application of moist heat is still a standard medical recommendation for certain types of infections like a sty or a skin abscess. The heat increases blood circulation to the area, which brings more white blood cells and immune cells to fight the infection. It can also help to lower the viscosity of pus, making it easier for the body to expel it. This process is called suppuration. The drawing effect wasn't magic, it was basic physiology. The ingredients they added also had real effects. We've already discussed the antimicrobial properties of garlic and the skin healing power of plantain. Onions contain quercetin and sulfur compounds that have anti-inflammatory and antibacterial effects. A 2016 study in the Journal of Wound Care explored the use of a traditional bread poultice and found that its high sugar and salt content could create an osmotic effect, drawing fluid out of the wound, which can help to reduce swelling and inhibit bacterial growth. The poultice was a surprisingly sophisticated drug delivery system, using heat and moisture to both treat the symptoms and help the body's own immune system resolve the problem. Today, if we have a deep splinter, we reach for sterile tweezers and antiseptic cream. If we have a skin infection, we take a course of oral antibiotics. These methods are powerful, but they can also be invasive or have systemic side effects. The poultice was a gentle, non-invasive way of encouraging the body to heal itself. Have we lost the art of working with the body's natural healing processes? Is our first instinct always to kill the infection from the outside in, rather than supporting the immune system from the inside out? What if a simple warm poultice could resolve a minor skin infection without the need for antibiotics, thereby reducing the pressure for antibiotic resistance? Number 13, could soaking in a cold river prevent the plague? In the medieval mindset, water was a powerful and often contradictory force. It could be cleansing and purifying, as in baptism, or it could be a source of disease and danger. But the therapeutic use of water, both hot and cold, has a history stretching back to the ancient world. The Romans were famous for their elaborate public baths. While this tradition declined in some parts of Europe after the fall of Rome, the use of water for healing, known as hydrotherapy, continued. In the medieval period, people sought out natural hot springs, believing the mineral-rich waters could cure skin diseases, arthritis, and other chronic ailments. But cold water had its place too. It was often recommended to reduce fevers and cool an inflamed body, fitting neatly into the humoral theory of medicine. Some physicians, like the 14th century Italian Gentile da Foligno, controversially advised against bathing during the Black Death, fearing it opened the pores to the bad air. Others, however, believed in its cleansing power, but beyond formal medical advice, The simple act of plunging into a cold river or stream was a folk remedy for shock, fever, and hysteria. The idea was to jolt the system, to drive out the fever or the madness with a sudden, shocking cold. It was a raw and brutal approach, but it was born from desperation and a belief in the power of natural forces. Monastic orders sometimes practiced forms of cold water immersion as a way to discipline the body and spirit, to suppress carnal desires and focus the mind. The practice was often linked to ideas of purity and endurance. They didn't have the language of physiology to describe what was happening. They couldn't talk about vasoconstriction or norepinephrine release. They just knew that a plunge into icy water had a profound and immediate effect on the body and mind. It woke you up, it took your breath away, it made the skin tingle, and the heart race. They interpreted these powerful physical sensations through the lens of their own medical and spiritual beliefs. Today, cold water immersion is experiencing a massive resurgence, championed by figures like Wim Hof, the Iceman. What was once a folk remedy is now being studied by neuroscientists and physiologists. And they are finding that the medieval people were onto something. When you immerse your body in cold water, it triggers a cascade of physiological responses. Blood vessels in your limbs and skin vasoconstriction constrict, shunting blood to your vital organs to keep your core warm. Your body releases a flood of hormones, including adrenaline and norepinephrine, which are part of the fight or flight response. This makes you feel alert and energized. A 2000 study from the Virginia Commonwealth University School of Medicine suggested that short, cold showers could help treat depression, possibly due to the intense stimulation of cold receptors in the skin, sending an overwhelming amount of electrical impulses to the brain. More recent research has focused on its anti-inflammatory effects. A study published in the journal PLOS One in 2014 found that trained individuals who practiced cold exposure and breathing techniques had a stronger immune response and fewer inflammatory markers when exposed to a pathogen. The medieval person using cold water to fight a fever was, in their own way, attempting to modulate their immune and inflammatory response. We live in a world of constant, comfortable temperatures. We move from heated homes to heated cars to heated offices. Our bodies are rarely, if ever, exposed to the natural thermal stresses that our ancestors experienced daily. Has this made our regulatory systems lazy? Are we missing out on a fundamental biological mechanism for resilience and health by living in a state of perpetual thermal neutrality? The science on cold exposure is still young, but it suggests that these short, sharp shocks can have profound benefits. What other ancient practices, dismissed as mere hardship, were actually vital forms of training for our immune and nervous systems? Number 12. Why did they eat food that had gone bad on purpose? In our modern sanitized world, the idea of eating rotten food is horrifying. We are taught from a young age to fear bacteria, to check expiration dates, and to throw away anything that smells or looks even slightly off. Our food system is built on pasteurization, refrigeration, and preservatives, all designed to kill microbes and extend shelf life. But for most of human history, and certainly throughout the Middle Ages, people had a very different relationship with microbes. They didn't know what microbes were, but they knew all about their effects. And they learned to harness them. Fermentation was not a health fad, it was a fundamental technology for survival. It was a way to preserve the harvest, to make food last through the long, lean winter months without refrigeration. Cabbages were turned into sauerkraut, milk was turned into cheese and yogurt, grains and fruits were turned into beer and wine. These fermented foods were not just ways to store calories, they were dietary staples. A medieval peasant's diet would have been rich in these living foods. They would eat dark, sourdough bread made from a fermented starter. They would drink ale or small beer, as it was often safer than the local water. They would eat cheese and pickled vegetables like sauerkraut or pickled beets. They saw fermentation simply as a way of transforming food, making it last longer, and in some cases, making it more digestible. They had no concept of probiotics or the gut microbiome, but they would have observed the effects. They would have known that these foods kept them alive through the winter, and perhaps they noticed that people who regularly consumed these foods had better digestion or were more resilient to certain illnesses. Texts from the period, like the Tecunum Sanitatis, a medieval health handbook, often described the properties of foods like cheese and vinegar, advising on how they affected the body's humors. They recognized these foods as being fundamentally different from their raw counterparts. The science behind this is now a major field of medical research. The trillions of bacteria living in our gut, collectively known as the gut microbiome, are now understood to be critically important for our health. They help us digest food, synthesize vitamins, regulate our immune system, and even influence our mood. The fermented foods that the medieval people ate were packed with a wide variety of these beneficial bacteria or probiotics. Sauerkraut, for example, is a source of lactobacillus species, which are known to support digestive health. Yogurt and kefir contain other beneficial strains. A 2021 review in the Journal of Functional Foods detailed the extensive evidence supporting the role of fermented foods in modulating gut microbiota and improving immune function. We are now realizing that the sterile, processed diet of the modern world may be starving our microbiome of the diversity it needs to function properly. By killing all the bacteria in our food, we may be inadvertently harming the good bacteria in our gut. The medieval diet, out of sheer necessity, was a constant source of microbial replenishment. We now buy probiotics in expensive little capsules, trying to reintroduce the bacteria that our food system has so effectively eliminated. We are paying a premium to get back what our ancestors got for free as a byproduct of food preservation. It's a profound irony. Did the incredible diversity of microbes in the medieval diet provide a level of immune resilience that we have now lost? Is the rise of autoimmune diseases, allergies, and inflammatory bowel disease in the modern world partly a consequence of our sterile diet and impoverished microbiome? What if the healthiest thing we could do for our gut is not to take a pill, but to eat a little bit of something that has, in a sense, gone bad on purpose? Number 11. Could burnt wood stop you from being poisoned? Accidental poisoning was a constant threat in the medieval world. People foraged for wild plants, and a mistake could be deadly. Food could become contaminated, and of course, there was the deliberate use of poison in political and personal disputes. When someone was poisoned or had eaten something they suspected was toxic, the options for treatment were slim and often violent, like inducing vomiting. But there was another much simpler substance that was used: charcoal, not the charcoal briquettes for your grill, but pure powdered charcoal made from slowly burned wood. Its use as a remedy is ancient, recorded by the Egyptians and Hippocrates. In the Middle Ages, it was known as a powerful antidote. Physicians and folk healers would administer a slurry of powdered charcoal mixed with water for a patient to drink. They believed it had the power to absorb the poison in the stomach and carry it harmlessly out of the body. The theory was simple. The charcoal was seen as a pure, inert substance with a great capacity to draw things to itself. It was used externally in poultices to draw out infection from wounds and internally to draw out poison from the gut. It was a physical, mechanical explanation that made intuitive sense. They didn't know about molecules or surface area, but they observed that when this black powder was ingested, the patient sometimes got better. It was a desperate measure for a desperate situation. The famous physician and alchemist Paracelsus, writing in the early 16th century, just after the medieval period, mentioned the use of charcoal for treating ailments caused by toxic metals like mercury and arsenic, showing the continuation of this tradition. This is one of the clearest examples of an ancient remedy that is still a cornerstone of modern emergency medicine. The substance we use is now called activated charcoal. It's made by heating carbon-rich materials like wood or coconut shells to very high temperatures and then activating it with steam or hot air. This process riddles the charcoal with millions of tiny pores, dramatically increasing its surface area. A single gram of activated charcoal can have a surface area of over 3,000 square meters. This vast porous surface works through a process called adsorption, not absorption. The toxins and poisons in the stomach and intestines physically stick to the surface of the charcoal particles like static cling. Because the charcoal itself is not digested or absorbed by the body, it passes through the digestive system, taking the absorbed poisons with it. It is still the first-line treatment for many types of oral poisoning and drug overdoses in emergency rooms around the world. A 2015 position paper from the American Academy of Clinical Toxicology confirms its role, stating that single-dose activated charcoal is a viable treatment if a patient has ingested a potentially toxic amount of a substance known to be adsorbed by charcoal. The medieval healers were exactly right. Burnt wood could, and still can, stop you from being poisoned. Activated charcoal is incredibly effective, but it works best the sooner it's given after a poison is ingested. The medieval person had it on hand in their home. Today, it's something administered by professionals in a hospital. Have we lost a piece of critical first aid knowledge that was once common? Beyond acute poisoning, there is a modern trend of using charcoal in everything from toothpaste to juice, with claims of detoxification. The science for this is weak, as charcoal is not selective and can also absorb nutrients and medications. But it raises a question: did our ancestors' diets, which often included charred or cooked over the fire foods, provide a small, regular dose of dietary carbon that had a subtle, cleansing effect on the gut? Are we missing this simple, primitive element in our modern, highly processed diets? Number 10. Was there a band-aid that could stop you from bleeding to death? In a world of axes, swords, and primitive farming tools, serious bleeding was a common and life-threatening injury. Without an understanding of surgical techniques like sutures or tourniquets, stopping the flow of blood from a deep cut was a matter of immediate and desperate importance. They would apply pressure, of course, but they also reached for specific plants that were known to help. One of the most famous and widespread of these was yarrow, or Achillea millefolium. Its very name speaks to its history. The genus name Achillea is said to come from the mythical Greek hero Achilles, who, according to legend, used the plant to treat the bleeding wounds of his soldiers during the Trojan War. The plant was also known by other names throughout the Middle Ages, like Herba militaris, military herb, or knight's milfoil. It was a staple in any battlefield medic's pouch or monastery infirmary. The use was direct and practical. The fresh leaves and flowers would be crushed or chewed and applied directly into the wound as a poultice. The goal was to stanch the bleeding quickly. It was also used for more minor, but persistent problems like nosebleeds. People would roll up a fresh yarrow leaf and insert it into the nostril. Its reputation was so strong that it was considered an essential plant for any household to have on hand. Hildegard of Bingen recommended it for wounds, writing that it could help heal the injury from the inside out. It was a plant that was intimately associated with blood and injury, a first aid kit that grew wild in fields and meadows across Europe. The folk wisdom was spot on. Yarrow's ability to stop bleeding, its styptic properties, comes from several of its chemical constituents. It contains tannins, which are astringent compounds that help to constrict tissue and blood vessels, physically slowing the flow of blood. But more importantly, it contains an alkaloid called alkaline. Research has shown that alkaline can facilitate blood clotting. A study published in the Iranian Journal of Basic Medical Sciences in 2017 looked at the wound healing activity of yarrow extract. The researchers found it not only had antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory properties, but also significantly promoted fibroblast migration and wound closure, which are critical steps in the healing process. We're able to see on a cellular level the effects that medieval soldiers and healers had been observing for centuries. Yarrow wasn't just plugging the hole, it was actively participating in the physiological process of hemostasis and healing. When that medieval soldier packed his wound with crushed yarrow, he was applying a powerful biologically active dressing that could genuinely save his life. Today, we have sterile gauze, clotting agents like Quick Clot for trauma situations and surgical intervention. These are incredible advancements, but what about for everyday cuts and scrapes? We reach for a plastic bandage. Yarrow not only helped stop the bleeding, but also provided anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial benefits to the wound site. It was a multifunctional medicine. Have we, in our quest for sterility and single-purpose products, lost the utility of these all-in-one natural remedies? The yarrow plant contains a complex symphony of compounds that work together. We have identified acetylene, but what role do the dozens of other compounds in the leaf play? Could a yarrow-based wound dressing be more effective than a simple sterile bandage by actively promoting the healing process, not just covering the injury? Number 9, did people really use onions to cure a cough? A deep, chesty cough in the Middle Ages was no small matter. It could be a sign of a simple cold, or it could be the start of bronchitis, pneumonia, or consumption tuberculosis, diseases that were often fatal. With no antibiotics or modern cough suppressants, people turned to the pungent, tear-inducing vegetable they had stored in their root cellars, the onion. Allium cepa, onions, like their cousin garlic, were seen as powerful, hot vegetables that could fight off sickness. One of the most common remedies for a cough or chest congestion was an onion poultice. A raw onion would be sliced or chopped, sometimes heated slightly, and then placed in a cloth. This cloth was then laid on the patient's chest or back, often overnight. The belief was that the powerful vapors from the onion would be inhaled and would also penetrate the skin, helping to break up congestion and ease the cough. Another popular remedy was an onion and honey syrup. Sliced onions would be layered with honey or sugar and left to sit. The sugar would draw the liquid out of the onion, creating a potent, if eye-watering, syrup that was taken by the spoonful. These were not obscure practices. They were standard folk medicine across Europe. The 16th century herbalist John Gerard wrote about the use of onions to provoke urine and the courses in women, and to help the biting of mad dogs. While some of the claims were fantastical, the core belief in its power for respiratory ailments was strong and persistent. The onion's pungency was seen as a sign of its strength. The fact that it made your eyes water and your nose run was interpreted as evidence that it could also make your lungs clear out phlegm. It was a logic based on direct, observable effects. What it does to the outside of the body, it must also do to the inside. This onion as medicine idea has a strong basis in its chemistry. Onions are rich in sulfur compounds, which are responsible for their sharp smell and are released when the onion is cut. These compounds, like diol disulfide, have been shown to have antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory properties. When you inhale the vapors from a cut onion, these compounds can help to loosen mucus in the respiratory tract, acting as a natural expectorant. This is why it can make your nose run, and it's the same mechanism that can help clear congestion from your chest. Onions are also one of the richest dietary sources of quercetin, a powerful antioxidant and anti-inflammatory flavonoid. And a 2016 review in the journal Molecules highlighted quercetin's ability to reduce inflammation and fight viral infections, particularly those affecting the respiratory tract. When you make an onion and honey syrup, you are essentially creating an anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial, and expectorant cough syrup. The honey itself is also a well-documented cough suppressant and has its own antibacterial properties. The combination is a potent, traditional remedy backed by modern science. We spend a fortune on over-the-counter cough and cold medicines. Many of them work by suppressing the cough reflex or drying up mucus. The traditional onion remedy, however, works by helping the body to expel the mucus to make the cough more productive. It works with the body's defensive mechanisms rather than against them. Have we become too focused on simply suppressing symptoms instead of supporting the body's healing process? And if a simple onion from the pantry can provide effective relief for a common cold, why have we become so reliant on expensive manufactured alternatives? What other common vegetables in our kitchen hold medicinal properties that we have completely forgotten? Number 8, could a sip of this broth really mend your bones? Imagine life in the Middle Ages. Hard physical labor was the norm. People walked everywhere. A broken bone or a painful joint was not just an inconvenience, it could be a threat to your livelihood. Setting a broken bone was a crude and painful process, and recovery was slow. People needed every advantage they could get to heal and stay strong. One of the ways they supported this healing was through diet. And a cornerstone of the recuperative diet was bone broth. This was not the thin, salty stock that comes in a carton today. This was a long, slow, simmered broth made from the bones, joints, and connective tissues of animals that would otherwise be discarded. Every part of the animal was used. They would simmer these bones for hours, even days, over a low fire until they became soft and began to dissolve. The resulting liquid was thick, gelatinous when cooled, and rich. It was considered a deeply nourishing and restorative food, given to the sick, the elderly, the frail, and those recovering from injury or childbirth. It was seen as a food that could rebuild the body from the inside out. The logic was simple and intuitive: to build strong bones, you should eat the essence of bones. The regimen Sanitatis Salernitanum advises that broths and soups give nourishment to the body. It was a fundamental belief that the properties of a food could be transferred to the person who ate it. Your bone broth was the ultimate, like cures, like food, believed to strengthen the skeletal system, soothe the joints, and provide a deep, easily digestible form of sustenance when a person was too weak to eat solid food. It was a slow, patient form of medicine that extracted every last bit of nutrition from the animal. Modern nutritional science has begun to validate this ancient wisdom. When you simmer bones and connective tissue for a long time, you break down the collagen into gelatin. Collagen is the most abundant protein in the human body, a key component of our bones, skin, tendons, and ligaments. The broth is also rich in other important compounds. Glucosamine and chondroitin, which are often sold as expensive supplements for joint pain, are released from the cartilage and connective tissue. It is also a good source of minerals like calcium, magnesium, and phosphorus, the very building blocks of bone. A 2017 study in the journal Sports Medicine found that supplementing with gelatin and vitamin C could help build collagen and potentially prevent or treat connective tissue injuries in athletes. While direct research on bone broth itself is still emerging, the science on its individual components is strong. When a medieval person drank a cup of long-simmered bone broth, they were consuming a rich, bioavailable cocktail of collagen, amino acids, minerals, and joint-supporting compounds that are essential for tissue repair and skeletal health. Our modern diet is heavily focused on muscle meat. We eat steak, chicken breast, and ground beef. We have systematically removed the bones, the skin, the cartilage, and the gristly bits that our ancestors prized. In doing so, have we created a dietary imbalance? We consume plenty of the amino acid methionine found in muscle meat, but very little of glycine found in collagen and gelatin. Some researchers suggest this imbalance could contribute to inflammation. Are we missing out on a whole class of essential nutrients by throwing away the very parts of the animal that our ancestors knew were the most medicinal? What if the rising rates of joint problems and osteoporosis are not just a matter of aging, but also a matter of a long-term systemic collagen deficiency in our diet? Number 7. Why did they think this weed was good for your mood? Sadness, anxiety, and a sense of gloom have always been part of the human experience. But in the Middle Ages, what we might call depression was often interpreted in a very different way. It might be seen as melancholy, an excess of the humor black bile, which was thought to make a person sluggish, sad, and withdrawn. It could also be seen as a spiritual affliction, a trial sent by God, or even the work of demons. Treatments could range from prayer and pilgrimage to dietary changes and herbal remedies. One of the most prominent herbs for lifting the spirits and calming the nerves was St. John's wort, or Hypericum perfratum. Its name is tied to John the Baptist, as the plant's bright yellow flowers were said to be in full bloom on his birthday, June 24th. The tiny, translucent dots on its leaves were thought to represent the wounds of the saint, and when the flowers were crushed, they released a reddish pigment like blood. This plant was considered a powerful protector against evil. It was hung over doorways to ward off evil spirits and witches, but its medicinal use was just as important. It was known as the devil's scourge because it was believed to drive out the demons of melancholy. Physicians and herbalists like the 16th century Paracelsus praised its ability to treat phantasmata and strange fantasies, what we might now describe as anxiety, depression, and insomnia. It was typically prepared as a tea or an infused oil. It was a ray of sunshine in plant form, a folk remedy for the darkness of the mind. For a long time, modern medicine dismissed these uses as pure superstition. But in the late 20th century, researchers began to take a serious look at St. John's wort. And what they found was remarkable. The plant contains several active compounds, most notably hypericin and hyperforin. These compounds appear to work in a way that is strikingly similar to modern antidepressant medications. They are thought to increase the levels of neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine in the brain. These are the chemical messengers that regulate mood. A major 2008 review by the Cochrane Collaboration, a highly respected global independent network of researchers, analyzed 29 trials involving over 5,000 patients. The review concluded that St. John's wort extracts were more effective than placebo, and were as effective as standard prescription antidepressants for treating mild to moderate depression, and had fewer side effects. This has led to the plant becoming a widely used, government-approved treatment for depression in many European countries, particularly Germany. The medieval belief that it could drive out demons was a metaphorical description of a real neurochemical effect. Despite the strong evidence, St. John's wort has a complex status. In the United States, it's sold as an unregulated dietary supplement, which means the quality and dosage can vary wildly. It can also have serious interactions with other medications, including birth control pills, blood thinners, and other antidepressants. This highlights a modern dilemma. We have a plant that is proven to be as effective as a pharmaceutical drug, but we struggle to integrate it into our medical system. Are we failing to properly utilize effective natural medicines because they don't fit our patent-based pharmaceutical model? How many other plants used for mental and emotional well-being have we dismissed as folklore without ever subjecting them to rigorous scientific study? Number 6, could this common spice really soothe a cough? Coughs and sore throats were a constant winter misery in the drafty, smoky homes of the Middle Ages. Respiratory infections were common and dangerous. People relied on simple, accessible remedies to soothe the throat, quiet a cough, and break up phlegm. One of the herbs that was found in nearly every monastery garden and kitchen plot was thyme, Thymus vulgaris. Today, we think of it primarily as a culinary herb, something to sprinkle on chicken or add to soups. But for the medieval person, its medicinal properties were just as, if not more important. Thyme was considered a powerful warming and drying herb, perfect for combating the cold and damp conditions of a chest cold, according to humoral theory. It was a key ingredient in remedies for coughs, bronchitis, and what they called shortness of breath. It was most commonly prepared as a hot tea or infusion, often with a bit of honey added. The steam from the hot tea would be inhaled, and the warm liquid would soothe the throat. The famous 11th century Persian physician Avicenna, in his The Canon of Medicine, a book that was a standard medical text in Europe for centuries, recommended thyme as an expectorant and antiseptic. Hildegard of Bingen also praised it, suggesting it for whooping cough and asthma. It was a trusted, gentle, and effective remedy, especially for children. It was the medieval equivalent of a cup of tea and a cough drop. The scientific basis for thyme's effectiveness as a respiratory remedy is very strong. The plant's essential oil is rich in a compound called thymol. Thymol is a potent antiseptic and antimicrobial agent. It can kill a wide range of bacteria and viruses. This is why thymol is still used today as an active ingredient in some commercial mouthwashes like Listerine and in antiseptic wipes. But thymol also has another important property. It's an expectorant and an antispasmodic. This means it helps to loosen and thin mucus, making it easier to cough up, and it also helps to relax the muscles of the trachea and bronchi, which can relieve the spasms of a cough and open the airways. A 2013 study published in the German medical journal Arzneimittelforschung Drug Research found that a combination of thyme and ivy leaf extract was a highly effective and safe treatment for acute bronchitis. Numerous other studies have confirmed the antimicrobial and antispasmodic effects of thyme extract. The medieval mother giving her coughing child a cup of thyme tea was administering a legitimate multi-symptom respiratory medicine. We have a vast array of specialized cough medicines. Some are expectorants, some are suppressants, some are decongestants. Thyme, in its natural form, seems to do a bit of everything. It fights germs, loosens phlegm, and calms the cough. Is this shotgun approach of natural remedies sometimes more effective for a complex condition like a cold than our silver bullet single molecule drugs? Why is a plant with such a strong evidence base still relegated to the spice rack in many parts of the world, while we rely on synthetic drugs with more side effects? How many other common culinary herbs have powerful medicinal actions that we are completely ignoring? Number 5. Could gargling salt water actually do anything? A sore throat in the Middle Ages could be the first sign of a simple cold or something far more sinister like strep throat or diphtheria, which could be deadly. With no way to diagnose the cause, treatment was focused on relieving the symptoms and preventing the illness from getting worse. One of the simplest, cheapest, and most universal remedies was the saltwater gargle. Salt was a valuable commodity in the medieval period, used primarily for preserving food. But its medicinal uses were also well known. A healer or a mother would dissolve a small amount of coarse salt in warm water and instruct the patient to gargle with it several times a day, being careful to spit it out. It was a practice passed down through generations, a piece of common sense folk wisdom. The reasoning behind it was straightforward. Salt was known as a cleansing and purifying agent. It could draw out moisture and was used to cure meat and prevent it from rotting. Therefore, it was believed it could also cleanse the throat and draw out the ill humors, or the poison that was causing the soreness and swelling. It was a physical, tangible sensation. The gargle would physically wash the back of the throat, and the salty taste felt clean and sharp. It was a simple action that gave the patient a sense of doing something to fight the illness. Medical texts of the era, drawing on knowledge from the ancient Greeks and Romans, often recommended salty or briny solutions for cleaning wounds and treating infections of the mouth and throat. This is a remedy that has survived the test of time and is still recommended by doctors today. And the science is elegantly simple. A saltwater gargle primarily works through osmosis. When the concentration of salt in the gargling solution is higher than the concentration of salt in the cells of your throat tissues, water is drawn out of those swollen, inflamed cells. This can help to reduce the swelling and relieve some of the pain. The gargling action also physically flushes out irritants and some of the bacteria or viruses from the surface of the throat. While salt water is not a powerful antiseptic in the concentrations used for gargling, it can create a temporary alkaline environment in the throat that is less hospitable to some types of bacteria. A 2005 study from the Mayo Clinic in Japan followed nearly 400 volunteers for 60 days during cold and flu season. They found that the group who gargled with plain water 3 times a day had a 40% decrease in upper respiratory tract infections compared to the control group. Adding salt likely enhances this effect through osmosis. The medieval person gargling with salt water was using a simple principle of physics to relieve their symptoms and support their body's ability to fight the infection. This is perhaps the simplest remedy on the list. It costs almost nothing. It has no side effects, and it works. It raises a critical question in our age of complex medicine. Are we consistently overlooking simple, effective, low-cost interventions in favor of more complicated and profitable ones? The fact that a practice from the Middle Ages is still standard medical advice today is a testament to its effectiveness. How many other simple preventative health measures practiced by our ancestors have we forgotten simply because there is no profit to be made from them? What if the most powerful tools for our health are not the newest or most expensive, but the oldest and most accessible? Number 4, could a broken bone herb actually work? Broken bones were a fact of life in medieval times. Without modern orthopedic surgery, setting a fracture was a matter of manual manipulation, followed by immobilization with wooden splints and cloth bandages. Healing was a long, uncertain process. A poorly set bone could lead to a lifetime of disability. Alongside the physical setting of the bone, healers used herbal remedies to try and speed up the healing process. One of the most famous plants for this purpose was comfrey, Symphytum officinale. Its folk names tell its story: knitbone, boneset, breezewort. The very name comfrey comes from the Latin confervere, meaning to grow together or to boil together. Its use was widespread and deeply ingrained in folk medicine. The primary use was external. The root or leaves of the comfrey plant would be mashed into a poultice and applied directly to the skin over the site of a fracture, a sprain, or a bad bruise. This poultice would be held in place by the splint and bandages. The belief was that the plant had a unique power to speed up the mending of bones and tissues, where it was thought to knit the broken ends of the bone back together, reduce swelling, and soothe the deep aching pain of the injury. Nicholas Culpeper, the famous 17th century English herbalist, whose work compiled much of the existing medieval plant lore, wrote that comfrey was so powerful that if you boiled the roots in water, they would glue together again. It was the go-to remedy for any kind of serious musculoskeletal injury. For centuries, this was seen as folklore. But modern science has shown that the medieval healers were, once again, astonishingly accurate. Comfrey's power comes from 2 key substances. The first is allantoin, the same compound found in plantain. Allantoin is a cell proliferant, meaning it speeds up the natural process of cell division and growth. This action helps to accelerate the healing of skin, tissues, and yes, even bone. The second is rosmarinic acid, which has potent anti-inflammatory and analgesic pain-relieving properties. When a comfrey poultice was applied, the allantoin encouraged the rapid growth of new tissue and bone cells, osteoblasts, while the rosmarinic acid helped to reduce the swelling and pain. It was a targeted topical treatment that addressed both the healing process and the symptoms. A 2012 review published in the journal Phytotherapy Research examined the clinical evidence for topical comfrey and found strong support for its use in treating sprains, osteoarthritis, and back pain. The German Commission E, a scientific advisory board, has approved the use of comfrey for the external treatment of wounds, fractures, and dislocations. There is a catch with comfrey. The plant also contains pyrrolizidine alkaloids PAs, which can be toxic to the liver if ingested in large quantities. This has led to a ban on the sale of oral comfrey products in many countries. The medieval use was almost always external, which largely avoided this problem. This presents a modern paradox. We have a plant with proven powerful healing properties, but we are afraid to use it because it also contains toxic compounds. Does this point to a flaw in our safe or unsafe binary thinking? The medieval healer understood dosage and application method. They knew not to eat it. Have we lost the nuanced understanding of how to use powerful natural medicines safely? Could modern science find a way to create a PA-free comfrey extract, giving us the incredible healing benefits without the risk? Number 3, could a root? Help you sleep in a fearful world. Sleep in the Middle Ages was not the consolidated 8-hour block we strive for today. It was often broken into two periods, the first sleep and second sleep, separated by a period of wakefulness in the middle of the night. But anxiety, fear, and pain could easily disrupt this pattern, leading to insomnia and exhaustion. In a world full of dangers, both real and imagined, a calm mind and a restful night were precious. For this, people often turn to a humble, rather foul-smelling root valerian, Valeriana officinalis. The root of the valerian plant has a pungent, earthy odor that some compare to old socks, but its effects were highly prized. It was the medieval world's premier sedative and anti-anxiety remedy. Valerian was used to treat what they would have called nervous affections, restlessness, and sleeplessness. Hildegard of Bingen used it as a tranquilizer and sleeping aid. It was prescribed for hysteria and emotional distress. It was prepared as a tea or a tincture, an alcohol extract, and its pleasant smell was simply tolerated for the sake of its calming effects. The Greek physician Galen, whose theories dominated medieval medicine, had prescribed it for insomnia back in the 2nd century, and its reputation as a sleep aid endured for well over 1,000 years. It was a gentle, non-addictive way to soothe a troubled mind and encourage the body to rest. The mechanism of valerian is still not fully understood, which is often the case with complex herbal remedies. However, scientists believe its effects are related to its interaction with the neurotransmitter GABA-gamma aminobutyric acid. GABA is the body's primary inhibitory neurotransmitter. Its job is to calm down nerve activity. Many modern anti-anxiety drugs like Valium and Xanax work by enhancing the effects of GABA. It is thought that compounds in valerian root, such as valerianic acid, may mildly increase the amount of GABA in the brain or prevent it from being broken down, leading to a gentle sedative effect. A 2020 meta-analysis of 60 studies published in the Journal of Evidence-Based Integrative Medicine concluded that valerian could be a safe and effective treatment to promote sleep and prevent associated disorders. The medieval person drinking a bitter tea of smelly valerian root was, in essence, taking a mild, natural tranquilizer that worked on the same neural pathways as modern pharmaceuticals. Modern sleeping pills can be powerful, but they often come with a risk of dependency, morning grogginess, and disruption of natural sleep cycles. Valerian is generally considered much gentler and safer. This raises an important question about our approach to problems like insomnia. Is our goal simply to knock a person unconscious, or is it to gently encourage the body's natural sleep processes? Does the subtle, multi-compound action of a plant like valerian offer a more holistic approach to sleep than a single, powerful synthetic molecule? What other plants might exist that can gently modulate our neurochemistry in ways that we are only just beginning to understand? Number 2, what did they put on a burn before we had modern medicine? Burns were a daily hazard in the medieval world. Open hearths for cooking and heating, candles and oil lamps for light, and the constant presence of fire meant that accidental burns, from minor scalds to life-threatening injuries, were common. A severe burn was often a death sentence, not from the initial injury, but from the subsequent infection and fluid loss. With no understanding of sterile technique or skin grafts, treating a burn was a desperate attempt to soothe the pain and protect the damaged skin from the air. One of the most precious and effective substances they had for this was honey. Not just any honey, but raw, unprocessed honey straight from the hive. It was applied directly to the burn and then covered with a clean cloth or a large leaf. Honey was valued as both a food and a medicine. It was one of the few sweeteners available, but its healing properties were considered almost magical. Its use on wounds and burns is ancient, documented by the Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans. The Leech Book of Bald, the 10th century Anglo-Saxon medical text, contains recipes for wound salves that use honey as a primary ingredient. Medieval physicians believed that honey was cleansing and promoted the growth of new flesh. They saw how it kept the wound moist, reduced the burns blistering, and seemed to prevent the putrefaction that so often set in. It was a soothing, protective, and sweet-smelling balm in a world of painful and often foul-smelling remedies. The medicinal power of honey is not magic. It's a complex combination of chemical and physical properties. First, honey is a supersaturated sugar solution. This high sugar content creates a strong osmotic effect, just like the saltwater gargle. It draws fluid out of the wound and out of any bacteria present, dehydrating and killing them. Second, honey is acidic, with a pH between 3.2 and 4.5, which is an environment where most bacteria cannot thrive. Third, and most remarkably, when honey comes into contact with the moisture from a wound, an enzyme called glucose oxidase, which the bees add to the nectar, slowly produces small, steady amounts of hydrogen peroxide. Hydrogen peroxide is a powerful antiseptic, so a honey dressing is essentially a slow-release antiseptic bandage that is gentle on the tissue. Furthermore, research on specific types of honey, like Manuka honey from New Zealand, has identified additional antibacterial compounds, such as methylglyoxal, that are effective against even antibiotic-resistant bacteria like Mycisa. A 2011 review in the Asian Pacific Journal of Tropical Biomedicine summarized the vast body of research on honey's wound healing properties, confirming its effectiveness as an anti-inflammatory and wound debriding agent. The medieval healer applying honey to a burn was using one of the most effective and sophisticated wound dressings known to science. We developed antibiotic creams and sterile synthetic dressings, and for a time, honey was relegated to the kitchen. But now, with the rise of antibiotic-resistant superbugs, medical science is looking at honey again. Medihoney, a medical-grade honey dressing, is now used in hospitals around the world. It is a full-circle moment, but it makes you wonder, what did we lose in the decades we ignored this ancient wisdom? How many people suffered from wound infections that could have been prevented by a simple natural substance? Does the complex, multi-pronged antibacterial action of honey hold a key to overcoming the problem of resistance that our single-molecule antibiotics created? Number one, what is the most basic medicine we've always had? If you strip away all the tinctures, the poultices, the herbs, and the rituals, what is the most fundamental medicine of all? What is the first thing we seek when we are sick or injured? It is nourishment. In the Middle Ages, as now, the body's ability to heal itself was directly tied to the fuel it was given. But when a person was very ill, with a high fever, a digestive ailment, or a serious injury, they often could not stomach solid food. The response to this was universal: give them a simple, nourishing liquid. This could be a thin-grained gruel, a diluted wine, or, as we've seen, a rich bone broth. The underlying principle was the same: provide easily digestible calories and nutrients to support the body's fight for survival. This wasn't a remedy in the sense of a drug, but it was the most important supportive therapy they had. The medieval theory of humors placed great emphasis on diet. Foods were classified as hot, cold, moist, or dry, and a physician would prescribe a specific diet to rebalance a patient's humors. For a feverish, hot and dry patient, they would recommend cooling and moistening foods. While the theory was flawed, the practical outcome was often sound. They would prescribe things like barley water, thin soups, and fruit juices. These foods provided hydration and simple carbohydrates for energy, which is exactly what a feverish body needs. The Tachinum Sanitatis, the medieval health handbook, is filled with advice on the properties of different foods and how they should be used to maintain health and recover from illness. The understanding that food is medicine was not a modern slogan, it was the bedrock of their entire medical system. The science behind this is so fundamental that we almost take it for granted. When the body is fighting an infection or healing a major trauma, its metabolic rate increases dramatically. It needs more energy, more protein, more vitamins, and more minerals. Dehydration is a major risk, especially with fever or vomiting. Providing easily digestible liquids and soft foods ensures the body gets the hydration and calories it needs without placing extra stress on the digestive system. We do the exact same thing in modern hospitals with IV drips, feeding tubes, and carefully planned clear liquid or soft diets for postoperative and critically ill patients. We have refined the delivery method, but the core principle is identical to that of the medieval healer feeding a patient barley water. It's about giving the body the basic building blocks it needs to perform the miracle of healing itself. In our modern world, we often see medicine and food as two separate categories. Medicine is what comes from the pharmacy, food is what comes from the grocery store. But this is a very new and unusual way of thinking. For most of human history, they were one and the same. Have we lost something profound by separating them? We search for miracle drugs to cure chronic diseases, but do we pay enough attention to the miracle of simple, whole foods in preventing them in the first place? What if the most powerful forgotten medieval home remedy isn't a specific herb or a potion, but the simple, radical idea that the first, best, and most important medicine of all is the food we eat every single day.